Hi, Sean here from the Trusted Agent Podcast, and thank you for joining us on today's show, where each week we talk to experts both inside the industry and outside the real estate industry to gain their unique perspectives on what they believe real estate agents can do to build their credibility, efficiencies, and connections with others. A huge shout out to our sponsor, Rezo, Real Estate Sales Online, who's absolutely revolutionizing how real estate agents deal with prospective buyers and vendors. Their online platform that manages the offers and acceptance process is simple, easy to use, giving time back to the agents so they can do what they do best. All right, so stick with me and let's see who today's guest on the show is. Hi, everyone. Sean here from the Trusted Agent Podcast, and thank you so much for joining us today. Today's guest, we have Mike Reid, who's the co-founder of Dent Global and also the co-author of the Canadian edition of the Becoming a Key Person of Influence. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us today.
Hey, Sean, thanks so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here because I've been following Dent Global, or as I knew them, pretty much as KPI for many years, well over 10 years. And the expansion that you have been able to develop along with Glenn and Daniel to take it to global has been totally outstanding. But for some of our viewers and listeners that may not have heard of KPI program or Key Person of Influence or Dent Global, would you mind just giving them a bit of an idea as the history of how that all came about?
What's it all about? Well, so my business partner Daniel Priestley wrote this book, Key Person of Influence, many years ago. It talks about this idea that every industry revolves around what we call key people of influence, people who are seen as the go-to people for what they do. They're seen as the go-to brand. They're not just great at whatever they do in their industry. What they've done is they've really focused on kind of 5 key areas of brand building and standing out and scaling up that separates them from everyone else in their industry.
Right. And I want to unpack some of those today because for me, that was a really big game changer. It was probably at that time, I was going to a lot of sales sessions, Tony Robbins, a few others around, and there was a lot of philosophies and belief systems, which I totally buy and get into. But what for me I was missing was a framework, something that was tangible that could actually help me become a key person of influence or help guide my thinking. So what is it that you first understood and identified as being the gaps for anyone trying to become a key person of influence within their chosen industry?
Mm-hmm. So it's a funny story of which I wasn't directly involved, but I'll kind of relay the story on Daniel's behalf. Is before starting Dent and kind of writing the Key Person of Influence book, Daniel and our other business partner Glenn ran an events marketing company for many years. And they would promote authors and speakers and commentators, and they were very good at running a sales and promotional engine. Right? They were great at filling a room, putting bums on seats at an event. And so, they would run large scale conferences with sometimes, a couple of thousand people, and Andrew Lloyd Webber's Palladium Theatre in the UK. And, so they built a bit of a reputation and name. And in the process of doing that, they had a lot of people come to them and say, hey, would you be willing to promote me as one of your key people and put me up on stage? And of course, lots of people who were budding authors or wanted to build their platform within their industry, they had a pretty attractive stage to be able to get onto. And so they have to find a polite way to basically sort who are the credible people, who are the not so credible people, or who had what it took and didn't. And so they'd send an email that would say, look, thanks for your interest. We won't consider you until you've at least got these things in place. Please let us know whether or not you meet this criteria. And so the first thing was, when you get up and communicate what you do, you need to have a compelling pitch, right? We need to make sure that the messaging is consistent and clear and it's compelling for our audience. If you've got a book, that's helpful. That builds more credibility and authority around your ideas and your philosophy and your principles, your thought leadership. So we want to make sure that when you get up and we put you on stage, that people see you as credible with authority. The third thing is that we can't just have you get up and just talk about what you do and say, hey, you can book in for a consultation with me directly. That's not a great way to commercialize your expertise. So you need to have product. You need to have productized your intellectual property and have some kind of product packaging that we can present and offer to people to buy, who are in that conference. The fourth thing is that when it's probably inevitable that people are going to Google your name. So we want Google to show up good things, and we want you to have a good profile. Watch, read, listen, do. There's credible, positive stuff online about you that paints your reputation in a positive light. And then the fifth thing is if you can bring some sort of a partnership or a sponsorship to the deal, then that would be great. And so they'd send this email, and it would sort of be to that effect of what I just described. And often they'd have people write back saying, hey, thank you so much for sending that through. Unfortunately, I don't have those things all in place, but it's giving me a clear framework of what I need to focus on in order to be promotable, if you like, right? Yeah. To be someone who's worthy of that platform. And so, that's where the method really began. And at that time, the global financial crisis of 2008 had come along, and basically, we kind of decimated the business, right? As it did many businesses at that point in time. And the guys were running a very successful multi-million pound company, revenue company, but the company at that time, they thought, you know what, the world's gone to custard, we're going to try and sell the business. And the business was worth very little, right? They built this very sort of from the outside in, very successful company. It had great revenue, etc. But they could barely sell it for £300,000.
Wow.
And so what they did was they had an advisor that they knew, that they brought into the business, and basically looked at the business up and down and went, okay, like, what's wrong? Why, we've got this business that's doing a few million pounds in revenue, and yet we can barely sell it for a few $100,000. And this person looked up and down the business and said, okay, the reason why it's not worth anything is because you don't have any assets.
Yeah.
You're just essentially brokering other people's stuff.
Right? Yeah, the database.
Selling other people's stuff. There's no underlying asset here. And when they pull the business apart, those 5 areas, as I described in that email, came up in the brainstorming session. And this mentor, this advisor said, that is your asset. Right? That's your IP. You need to go out and develop that, right? That's unique to you. And so it led to, probably 6-12 months later, Daniel publishing the Key Person of Influence book for the first time. And we ended up launching an accelerator, helping the founders of traditional service companies to apply the principles in the book. We paired them with amazing mentorship and guidance and structure. And over the course of about 6 months, in that very early days, we took a cohort of entrepreneurs through the process and helped them execute and build these 5 areas into their business. And the transformations were extraordinary. Like, it was, personal trainers going from, making £50,000 or dollars a year to $250,000 in the space of 6 to 12 months, just by repositioning and repackaging how they communicate their value, how they charge for what they do, how they package the solution based on value and not based on time. And that's where it all began.
So for many people, in particular, when they're in the crux of almost on the crippling of devastation of where they are as a business, and thinking they have this vision of what success looks like to them, but feeling it's unattainable or so far away, out of reach, when in fact it could be just centimeters away on a page sitting on the table. I could only imagine what it might have been like for the co-founders. Was it a humbling experience, do you think, to see the reality of it was there all the time?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just humbling, it was kind of devastating at the time because, from the outside in, for all intents and purposes, it was a very successful business, doing millions of pounds in revenue, huge client base, great reputation, et cetera, but there was no underlying assets. And the phrase that Darren had shared with Daniel and Glenn was that income follows assets. And in business and life, if for everyone listening in the real estate industry, you'll understand this better than most, that when you own a house and you can generate rental income, or if you own shares in a company, you generate dividend income. Well, in business, especially in a traditional service business, if you're in real estate, the value of what you do is based on your experience and stories and intellectual property and like your methods and your process and your way and things like that. That all of that IP, that's valuable. And if it's all locked up in our head, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a real estate professional, then there's no real kind of the mechanism of delivery of that value is you, and that's not really building assets from a business standpoint. What we need to do is get that IP out of our heads and then convert it into collateral, material, digital assets, content, packaged into forms that let that IP scale. And so, yeah, that's where, it kind of went from a devastating realization to it actually gave birth to, a company today, which has offices in Toronto servicing the Americas, in Sydney servicing Asia Pacific, and London in Europe. We've acquired businesses in web development, video production, publishing. We've spun out software as service companies. We've grown an accelerators business into a community of 3,500 companies that we've worked with over the last 10 years. And, all through that journey, our philosophy and the reason we've been able to scale across multiple geographies and different products and acquire different businesses into the group and things like that is fundamentally driven by one simple idea and philosophy, which is income follows assets.
Yeah. And what I also love about the KPI, and maybe it was lost on me the first time, and maybe it was something to do with my age at the time, early 30s, and thinking the world was all about me, perhaps. But when I first was introduced to it, I was thinking, how do I become a key person of influence? But the principles that you teach and share really can be adopted for companies as well. You mentioned 3,500 companies that you've worked with. So I think for our listeners and viewers is don't think about this just as you as a real estate agent, but think about your brand as an agency as well, and how you can evolve that. What are the similarities that you see in the people that come to you and work with Dent Global, and what's the problem they're trying to fix? I don't want to be presumptive, but I imagine it's just simply about standing out in their industry that's highly competitive.
Yeah, I mean, look, the key problems for our clients, Sean, are many times they're overworked, right? What they deliver is really often based on their time. If they're trading time for money, it doesn't give them the capacity for growth and scale. Often if you are really just selling time, then you're at the incentives are misaligned between your client. It's like you become more efficient and effective at what you do. You earn less. You take longer. It's to the detriment of your client, but you get paid more. It's just it's not a great paradigm to be in. And so as a result, they feel pretty tired and burnt out and jaded just from the fact that, if they stop, their whole business stops. The other key problem is that for many of them, they just feel a bit invisible in their industry and they lack difference. They're not really sure, how do I communicate what we do and the way we approach it and our philosophy and our principles in a way that does really stand out and is unique in the market. I appreciate as a real estate agent or as a real estate professional or a real estate company, it's a highly saturated industry. You've got lots of competition. You've got, lots of agencies and agents saying very similar stuff. So, it is, the truth of the matter is that it is a hyper competitive industry, and I believe, more important than probably, any other industry is that you really have to figure out how do we start to establish some thought leadership around our approach and our brand that kind of starts to create a moat, if you like, around our patch of land. And that's the thing I think in every industry is that we've got the ability to find a particular patch, which, makes sense for maybe you as an agent or you as a agency to be really focused on going, we're going to triple down on this being our particular niche. And that niche could be based around a type of person that you service. It could be based around a particular outcome or a destination that you want to be known for delivering for your clients. It could be based around some kind of core philosophy that you really believe that you want to bring your audience along with. So here's a common example, which everyone should be familiar with. So Simon Sinek wrote the book Start With Why. And he has this, great TED talk, and it's this simple little phrase, start with why. And yet that phrase has a lot of meaning to it, right? There's a whole narrative behind it. And what he's done a beautiful job of doing is creating the kind of the core message and the narrative behind it in a way that's totally transforms people's perceptions and heart and mind around how they should show up as a leader. And when well packaged in the right container of value in the form of something like that TED Talk, and then the book and all the ecosystem of everything else that goes around it, then all of a sudden he's known as the guy that teaches people and shows people how to start with why. It's a simple little concept, but there's plenty of leadership coaches and trainers out there. Right? Yeah. Plenty of coaching and training companies teaching people about how to be a better leader. No one is quite like Simon Sinek and Start With Why. And if you really boil it down, it just boils down to he's captured the essence of the outcome that he knows his people want, his audience want. He knows his audience. He's been able to unpack a really kind of amazing framework and stories and narrative that hooks you into that idea. And once you become a disciple of Start With Why, you're not looking elsewhere for leadership guidance. You're looking at him. And that shift of belief system from, I had an old paradigm of the way I saw, real estate agents or the way I saw the real estate industry, to boom, you've been able to create a new paradigm of the way that your market and your audience see real estate, see the real estate industry as a profession, see the professionalism of real estate. Like if we can change that paradigm through well-crafted thought leadership and build a narrative and an ecosystem of content around it, then you will carve out a patch of land of people who believe what you believe, they buy into your worldview and your ideas. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about, differentiating and positioning yourself as, kind of different, unique as that key brand or key person of influence.
Yeah. Real Estate Sales Online, or Reza, who's the sponsor of this podcast, the Trusted Agent podcast, they work with real estate agents in Australia and New Zealand that are typically time poor. They're looking to get an edge up on their competition. They're tech savvy and they're looking to stand out from the rest and looking to improve their processes and build that instant trust with both purchasers and vendors. And we have our own ways of doing it on the online platform to help them build that greater credibilities and efficiencies and connections with others. But when thinking about KPI, I think this is an absolute fit, because when you explained who the clients are who come to you, being time poor and they're looking to stand out, that's why I wanted to get you on the podcast, because I do believe that the 5P formulation and the foundations that you offer could really help so many agents. Can you just, are you allowed to give away the IP of what the 5Ps are?
Oh yeah, of course. I've just been holding it back, leaving you in suspense until this moment. So yeah, go for it. Or ask me a question and then I can unpack it for you.
Yeah, great. So, okay, first of all, for our listeners and viewers, you talked about the importance of having all those key elements, and for people to work with you and get on the stage, they had to have these, and the realization that you yourself as the company or the co-founders at the time didn't have them in the company, but once you did, the business blew up, and you've been able to do that for 3,500 other companies and individuals out there, and helping people become the key person in their chosen industry. So please, for our listeners, what are the 5 Ps?
What are the 5 Ps? Okay, so it all begins with pitch, right? It begins with, how do you answer the question, what do you do, in a way that is compelling, that creates cut through, that gets the attention and hooks the attention of your market. Often, I don't know if anyone listening, you've probably had this experience where you come across someone who just is a really engaging communicator. And often they can say more in 2 minutes than maybe some people can say in 2 hours around what it is that they do. And what we realized in delivering a great pitch is that there's a consistent architecture. There's a framework of how we evaluate information as human beings. Sean, if you're getting up and talking about what you do and you're trying to explain it to someone that doesn't really know much about your work, and vice versa for me or anyone else listening, the way we sort of evaluate value, like we kind of the way we determine how to make a decision around moving forward with something, it's a pretty consistent, the framework is consistent for all human beings, right? It's just like as humans, we evaluate information in a consistent way. But the content of what you talk about, what I talk about, is quite different. So this is where a structure becomes important. And in our approach with our clients, we teach them around sort of 3 core pitches they need to be delivering. One is what we call a social pitch, which is if you're in a social setting, it's just a kind of short, elevator style pitch. You've got 30 to 60 seconds to answer the question, what do you do? And how do you explain that powerfully? Through to a more scheduled pitch, which for many agents, you would have the opportunity, you book in for a meeting and there's a conversation that's, half an hour in the calendar or whatever it is. That gives you an opportunity to pitch. That's where what we call the capstone pitching framework becomes relevant. And then there's a sales pitch, which is, maybe you've gone from a scheduled presentation to one prospect or even a few prospects at a time through to a sales conversation where you're actually, talking about doing a deal, et cetera. And there's a slightly different approach to that. The social pitch, if I can maybe talk about that framework, Sean, is easy to remember. And the way I want you to think about it is that the most important thing to deliver in your pitch in the beginning is clarity. Too often we try and differentiate our pitch too soon out of the gate. So you're a very competitive market. You want to come across as unique and different. And so often people, when they're pitching, they start to kind of invent terminology. They use fancy language. It feels salesy and a bit slick from the get-go.
Yeah.
Whereas in the beginning, what the listener really needs is they just need clarity. They just need to understand who are you, what do you do? Help me put you into a category so my brain can connect to connect the work you do to something I'm familiar with. Yeah. So the way I'd open a pitch is I'd say, hey, my name's Mike. And so say your name clearly, and then what industry are you in? What are you the same as? So, I'm a coach. We run a coaching company, right? Or we're in the education industry. It's always important when you get up and you open a conversation with someone, or you open with a pitch, you got to make sure that you put yourself into a category that the listener is familiar with. So they can go, okay, I'm familiar with education. I understand what a coach is. Got it. I can put you into that box. Whereas if I said, hey, my name's Mike, I specialize in transforming people's lives and businesses. It's not like that. If I'm going straight to some level of like specialization or what maybe in my belief or perception makes me different. But for you as the listener, you're going, what does that exactly mean? Like, I'm still not clear, right? And it's going to require further explanation and further explanation. And then as you go through more and more explanation, the person is trying to keep up with what you're saying over here, but their brain is still stuck on that thing you said initially. Mm-hmm. I'm still not exactly clear. So name and same, right? Hey, my name's Mike. I run a coaching company. We're in the education industry. Is putting me into a box or a category. Yep. So same thing for you as an agent. The third thing is you can talk about what we call fame. And that's where you get to differentiate a little bit more. Okay. So that's where you can talk about who you target, like your specific type of ideal customer or niche. You can talk about particular problems, like a specific problem that you're known for solving, and a particular outcome that you're known for getting people to. So for me, if I may, Sean, I'll give you the fame section of my pitch, which is, I say, hey, my name's Mike. I run a coaching company called Dent. We're in the education industry. And we specialize in working with the founders of 6 to early 7-figure revenue traditional service companies, usually who are struggling to differentiate themselves, stand out in their industry. And what we're most known for is helping establish them as what we call key people of influence in their industry in less than 12 months.
Yeah. Awesome. I can see that. Name, same, fame, under who, the problem, and the outcome. Simples.
Yeah.
It's great, but it's so powerful and impacted. And we see so many people trip over that every day when sitting around the barbecue. It's like, hey, how are you? It's like, I'm in real estate, and kind of just leaving it short.
It ends there. And that's right. You don't want to leave it short at name and same, because then you really are the same as everyone else.
Yeah.
The fame section is where you get to actually get someone's attention and hook their attention enough for them to go, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that.
Right there, I think our listeners and viewers are going to take away that golden nugget. And I know we don't have time to go through the other golden nuggets within the 4 remaining P's, but could you just cover off what the 4 remaining P's are?
Oh yeah, for sure. So when you're clear in terms of, okay, how do I get up and pitch myself? The next step is we need to build thought leadership around the work you do or your pitch, and fundamentally that comes down to publishing, right? So the fastest way to accelerate trust with your audience is they need to watch, read, and listen and spend time doing things in your world. And so we need to transfer kind of how do you take people through the process of evaluating what's the right next move for them, or how should they better diagnose some of the problems or the issues or the challenges they're experiencing. What is that result or outcome that they should be striving for, and what's the process they should be following in order to get there. The reason we publish is we want to build authority around a destination that you're known for getting people to and how you get them there. But we also want to make sure we unpack and communicate that so that we can repackage that sales process into a form that lets it spread. So something like a book is a powerful asset because it converts that sales conversation or the initial priming conversation into a format that you could have 100, 1,000, 10,000 prospects consuming that at one time. It also turns that sales process into a stickier form of marketing. So it can sit on someone's bookshelf for 6 months or 12 months, and maybe they don't read it, 6 or 12 months later. But that one initial message hooked their attention, had them lead to some kind of like opt-in, let's say, or purchase of a book or whatever it may be. And then, whether they read it then or whether they read it in 6 months, whether they maybe never read it, but someone mentions something about it in 12 months time, they're like, you know what, I got that book on my bookshelf. I should probably pull it out. And that's why publishing is so powerful. The third step is product. And what we mean by product essentially is that products and services alone don't make money. It's the ecosystem that makes money. So we want, if you imagine like Apple as an example, Apple sells, amazing electronics, but when you buy an iPod from Apple, I think back to the days when iPod was first invented, iPod's a remarkable product, right? Amazing product in and of itself, but Apple doesn't really consider you a core customer if you just own an iPod. Yeah. It's when you've got the iPod together with the phone, and nowadays the iPad, the watch, and the MacBook all talking to each other in the iCloud. Only at that point will they consider you a core customer. Up until then, you're really just a prospect. And however, right, and this is the genius of Steve Jobs back in the day, was that he shifted $75 million of ad spend from the MacBook into the iPod, right? And started marketing that. And the iPod exploded, right? As a product, it indoctrinated people into Apple's ecosystem. And while it solved a small problem at that time, it unpacked a bigger problem of, it doesn't, this is a beautiful product, but it doesn't really kind of work as beautifully as my PC and with everything else in my kind of PC ecosystem. And so slowly but surely, you become indoctrinated into Apple until such time as, either, if you're like me, you're a total fanboy and you'd never consider leaving the ecosystem, but not to say that everyone else is like that in the world. However, that's what we need to do in your business. It's about products that get attention, products that build trust, productize value that does those things, that create a trail of breadcrumbs leading to your core products and services.
Love it.
The fourth P is profile. The fourth P really kind of only becomes important once you've got the first three, well tuned. So if you don't have a clear message, if you don't have good thought leadership, if you don't have a productized way to commercialize the attention of the market, right, then no point spending too much time on social media, wasting time just trying to build like a Facebook or Instagram, page or whatever it may be. Really think about, how do I get those first 3 areas dialed in? And then at that point, building a profile can be hugely powerful. Building a profile is much like kind of the Eiffel Tower of Paris. It's designed to raise the flag, get the attention of the market, create some real cut through, but where the money gets made is in the Parisian landscape.
Yeah. I love
in
that.
The restaurants, it's in the bars, it's around the beacon of the thing that pulls people into the business in the first place. So, there's a few different ways we can build profile. We can do it in social and online media and traditional media. We can do it in winning awards, right? And getting recognition and accolades for the work you do can be incredibly powerful for building profile. We can do it in live speaking, right? Getting up and speaking and talking about, your thought leadership to wider and wider audiences. And then the 5th area is partnership. And really partnership is solving the problem for, what are the missing links in your business? And who already woke up with those missing links today? And how do we find ways to exchange value with them? For example, you might lack a little bit of reach and distribution. Who already has reach and distribution? Who's already got the email list? Who's already got the audience? And what can we bring to the table in a potential partnership that would be of value to them in exchange for, presenting, your message, your value proposition, your products, your services in front of their audience? Or, maybe you're an early stage agency, haven't been around for that long. Who's already got wow factor in the industry? Maybe, if you've been an agency that has been around for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, let's say, and you lack a little bit of trust and credibility compared to the incumbents that have been around for a long time, then I'd be thinking about, okay, who already has like huge wow factor in the industry? Who's someone who's got celebrity status in the industry? Who's already the key people? Who are the key people of influence? How do you bring them into your business in some kind of way? Maybe this is simply just hosting a series of events talking about industry trends, right? You bring the key people of influence in as guest speakers. Maybe you invite some of them to become part of an advisory board or an ambassador for some sort of message or important kind of like cause that you're championing in the industry. For example, maybe you would champion a cause called like hashtag respect your agent, let's say. Mm-hmm. And respect your agent is a new paradigm from the old paradigm that actually, maybe real estate agents aren't trustworthy, shouldn't be respected. To actually, there's a whole new paradigm nowadays, and there's a whole new level of professionalism, and so on and so forth. And it's called respected agent, and you gather a group of the key people to tell stories and share content and create a movement around that one thing. These are just examples of like thinking about, okay, we lack a little bit of that wow factor. Who has it right now, and how can we bring them in and find ways to support them and reward them in exchange?
I love that. And I think thinking about partnerships of people who aren't, obviously who aren't competing with you, but you sometimes thinking laterally about your local community and the lifestyle element, and just what are the commonalities or complementary benefits that you can bring to, say, if you were doing a workshop or a community type event. I love that. When it comes to publish, I think sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, to piggyback on that point, like it's such a great point, Sean, that it doesn't have to be within the industry. Like any brand that's bigger and more established and more credible than yours, and it's adjacent, if you can partner with them in some sort of a way, all that credibility of that adjacent brand just all rubs off on your business. It's just the kind of the magic of how partnerships work. So yeah, I agree.
I loved in Publish when you said you're trying to get people to indoctrinate into what you're delivering by watching, reading, and listening. And sometimes when people think of assets, they think of just the book, but there's a whole range of digital assets they could be building for themselves as well.
Yeah, totally. So activities are a fantastic way to indoctrinate someone into your world. We have a platform we call ScoreApp. If you go to scoreapp.com, it's a company that we actually spun out of Dent, and it helps people to build digital diagnostic tools, or essentially a scorecard, like a quiz, a way to have your prospects and your audience go through a series of questions that helps them better evaluate their strengths and their weaknesses around, your methods and your approaches and what you do. And basically it helps them kind of diagnose, what would be my, let's say my readiness to sell our home score, or, like how prepared am I to sell above market? For example, that could be a scorecard of which there's 20 or 30 questions that spit out a report and a score at the end to help someone evaluate, I'm 30% of where I could be or should be in order to sell above market. I've got a bit of work to do.
Contact this agent, click through.
Yeah, right. And so that activity helps to engage them in that process of discovery and becoming indoctrinated. And you can create templates, you can create tools and all sorts of different things, but watch, read, listen, do. Those are kind of like the 4 learning styles of how you want to build content.
I didn't realize Score App was the Dent product. It's fantastic. The templates are really helpful in just building 90% of the framework. Insert your questions here.
Yeah,
very good product. Thank you so much. Do you have any advice for real estate agents, that are looking to build it? I think you've covered it with the 5 Ps, but to build greater credibility, efficiencies, and trust, is there anything that they can walk away? You gave us a gold nugget with the pitch element, name, same, and fame. But is there anything else that you could say, really devote some time into this right now?
Yeah. So look, all I would say is that for many agents, it might feel comfortable to hide behind the brand of your brokerage, or to think that your brokerage gives you the maybe the credibility that you need, and that alone just is not enough in this world that we live in. We live in a hyper, competitive, digitized world where more and more and more as people, as consumers, we want to engage with other people. We want to, we're totally inundated with messages and with ideas and with content, and the trick is, who are the right people that are curating the industry, right? Because I kind of want to go to the curators of the industry, not just the people who are sort of adding to the noise, or just anyone that kind of comes across the same. So yeah, my message here is focus on building your personal brand. Really lean into this idea of you as the individual need to be the champion and the ambassador for what you believe, and your particular methods and your approaches in your industry. That can sit comfortably alongside the right kind of brokerage that's open to having key people of influence within its brokerage, really leading the way. And I think the combination of those two, the 1-2 punch of a powerful, brokerage to be aligned with, and a powerful personal brand, is a winning formula.
I agree totally. Mike, thank you so much for your time today. For our viewers and listeners today, if they want to learn more about KPI principles or Dent Global, how can they reach out to you?
So I'd recommend go to dent.community. So that's DENT.community. And you'll see some stories and examples of some of our clients over the last 10 years who've been applying these methods, and you'll be able to kind of grab some resources and books and things like that from there. I'd recommend go check out a story of a gentleman called Chris Chopite. He's a real estate agent and one of our clients over here in the Americas. Just tells a really fantastic story of how he's applied the method for him as an agent in his industry. And so if you just look up Chris Chopite on that page towards the end, you'll see his story, and I think you'll enjoy watching it.
I love the name Chopite.
Yeah,
that's excellent.
It took me a solid 3 or 4 sessions to learn how to say his name properly.
And of course, Dent Global, I believe you can still get copies of the book as well. And is that out there?
Absolutely. If you, I'm sure, Sean, you'll put it in the notes, but if you are just listening and you buy your browser or your phone right now, just go to becomeakpi.com. That's becomeakpi.com, and you'll be able to grab a copy of the book.
And is it still a gift at the moment? at the time of recording?
It is. If you're in the Americas, we'd be happy to ship you a copy as a gift from us. If you're not in the Americas, then you can just grab the PDF download there.
Fantastic. Excellent. Mike, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for sharing some of those gold nuggets, and for our listeners and viewers today, as being someone who's followed Dent for over 10 years, the amount of content and free information that's there, but their Accelerate program is absolutely outstanding as well. And I do encourage you, if you're looking to take your business from here to here in the next 12 months, this is definitely something worth checking out. So thank you very much, Mike.
Great to be here. Sean, thanks for having me.
No worries at all. And we hope to see the rest of you on our next episode of the Trusted Agent Podcast. Thanks very much. Bye.